Given the response of the first video on shadow work, I thought, well, let's do part two. I don't know how many parts shadow work has to it. I have a feeling it goes on and on for as long as we do. But I had a couple other things. I was also considering putting some of my lectures. So I'm not formally in academia anymore, but I was one of my favorite classes was artificial intelligence and film. We're going to take a look at movies like I, Robot or Ex Machina and analyze them from a psychological viewpoint. And this is really important because artificial intelligence is changing our experience here on the planet. And as Deepak and I sort of went into, we're no longer the smartest thing on the planet as far as thinking goes. Machines have been able to outthink us for quite a while, and so there's going to be a lot of psychological ramifications, and so we can explore that through these different movies. And so it's a lot of fun, and let me know if you have any interest, because I would enjoy doing that. So, but this video is really about continuation of shadow work, and shadow work is just, there's no conclusion to it. You work on it your whole life because it's so involved in human existence. Now, I had thought I had listened to every Alan Watts lecture that's available, and had a wonderful little surprise yesterday where just stumbled online to one I had not heard before, and it was perfect timing. You could really say a synchronicity of sorts. And he was talking about kids entering college, and typically we do things like we give them these ridiculous things like SATs, where before we would remember, depending on how old you are, and these were aptitude tests, scholastic aptitude tests, and they realize you can't measure aptitude; it's kind of meaningless. That's why they just call the SAT now. And Alan had a really interesting exercise that he wanted to replace any kind of entrance exam for college with. And it went something like this. You give the potential student 20 pages, and you simply ask them to describe what they would consider their paradise. And it's pretty, it sounds kind of simple. But then the counselor would go through with them and help them understand the depth and the complexity of what they consider to be all the good, because everything that we consider to be good has cast a shadow. And so they're woven together in a really intricate way. So he said, well, you want a lot of money. As a lot of people might say, I have asked students for a long time, what would your dream salary be for your first job? And it's always 100,000. And all that sounds fine. I asked you what your dream job was, and you said 100,000. But there's always some kind of shadow that comes along with money. As if suddenly you find yourself, here's millions and millions of dollars. Okay, now what are you going to do with it? You would find yourself worrying. What am I going to do with it? Do I give it away? How much do I keep? Is someone going to steal it? Do I hire guards? Can I trust the guards? And of course, Alan had brought that up in a different lecture. So it's a very interesting way to realize that anything good casts a shadow. And we don't always know what is good. So if we're not really sure what is good, that makes the shadow work even more complex. There's an excellent episode I would highly recommend from Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's actually called Tapestry. And it's where Picard, Captain Picard, if you don't know the characters, but he had an artificial heart, and it was because of something he really regretted in his life. And Q, his all-powerful being, gives him the opportunity to go back and just change that one thing. And so for Picard, that was been kind of shadow work. It's like, hey, there's one thing, kind of a dark side to me that really messed up my future. If I could just go back, and that's what the metaphor, like if I could just pull that one thread out of my life, I could really improve the good. And the conclusion, and I can tell you this, and still worth watching, but in the end, he discovers that just like a tapestry, if you pull on one thread, everything else vibrates, everything else gets affected. So there was no way to go back and just eliminate that one bad thing. And so when we do the shadow work, the part of it is the relationship between the good things in our lives and the bad things. And when you integrate the shadow, you start realizing it is like a complex tapestry. And if we just lay out our dream job, our dream career, our dream life, we start to realize that this is just what the ego is projecting, and the ego doesn't get that complex relationship. Um, so if we don't really know what the good is, then we don't really know what the bad is, and that brings together that wonderful yin and yang of uh, life and human existence. And so someone invariably, in fact, on the Deepak video, someone had brought up a question, because when we talk like this, it's very easy for us to throw in the extremes. And someone had brought in, what about all the real tragedies that have happened in human history? I mean, wouldn't you go back and, eliminate slavery, or couldn't we just have gotten rid of World War II or any of the wars? You know, well, it's an interesting point, and it's one that takes shadow work to really the next level. But first, let me describe what I do with these lectures and what I do with these videos and what I do with my book. In fact, it's interesting. I got up this morning and found a 1-star review for No Self, No Problem. And whoever wrote it was just furious because they were expecting answers. And they're like, this person just set me up because they didn't give me any answers. And I think maybe I need to be more clear. Like, that's not what I do. My job is not to give you any answers. Every bit of spiritual work you do is your work. Remember Alan Watts? He said, any spiritual teacher who tries to sell you something is like stealing your watch and then trying to sell it back to you. I mean, it's your watch. It's your work. It's like my wife just bought a car yesterday, and, she has to drive it, though. So the salesperson sold the car. But if my wife was like, well, why aren't you going to drive me around? He would have given her probably a really strange look. Like, I'm just here to sell you the car. It's your car. You have to drive it and maneuver it and take care of it. And so I feel like what I do in all of this is much more like, here's the car. Here's some tricks. Here's the way the brain works. And, let's look at a little bit of navigational help. But in the end, it's all your work, and all of it is your answers. So I have no answers in any of this. I never really want to lead anyone down that path, to think that at the end of some lecture, I'm going to give you some kind of answer. But forgot where I was going with that. Now I really do feel like I'm back in lecture mode. If I was in class, my students are familiar with that experience where I go down a little path and then get distracted. And so I think I'm just going to leave that in the video because that's a wonderful quote from William James. In fact, it was the last thing William James wrote. From one story, he penned this and then died. So maybe to be a nice way to leave this. It's actually the way I left the Neurotics Guide. There is no conclusion. And William James wrote that. He said, there is no conclusion. What has concluded that we may conclude in regard to it? And so that really fits with the quest for an answer. Just, well, come on, just give it to me. I just want this kind of simple cheat way through it all. But no, here's the keys. The car's yours. It's your trip, and it's your spiritual journey.